Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you to speak about a journey, not just of success but of survival. Not just of dreams but of determination. This is the story of Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows. There was a time when Joe Ranga was invisible to the world. No spotlight. No applause. No recognition. Only struggles that tested his patience and storms that tried to break his spirit. He walked through moments where doubt whispered, "Give up." Where failure stood tall like a wall blocking every road forward. But shadows are not permanent. They exist only because there is light somewhere nearby. Joe Ranga understood something powerful, that darkness is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of transformation. Instead of running from hardship, he embraced it. Instead of fearing rejection, he used it as fuel. Every setback became a lesson. Every loss became preparation. When doors closed, he built his own. When voices mocked him, he silenced them with discipline. When fear tried to freeze him, he moved forward anyway. Rising from the shadows is not about sudden success. It is about daily effort. It is about choosing courage over comfort. It is about believing in yourself when nobody else does. Joe Ranga's journey teaches us that greatness is not born in comfort. It is forged in struggle. The shadows did not destroy him. They shaped him. They sharpened his mindset. They strengthened his resilience. They refined his vision. And today he stands not as someone who never fell, but as someone who refused to stay down. If you feel lost, if you feel unseen, if you feel surrounded by darkness, remember this: the shadows are temporary. Your potential is permanent. Rise, fight, build, believe. Because just like Joe Ranga, you too can rise from the shadows and step into your light. Perseverance is not just a quality, it is a decision repeated every single day. In the journey of Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows, perseverance was not optional, it was survival. There were moments when everything seemed to collapse at once. Plans failed. Efforts went unnoticed. Dreams felt distant. Yet, what separated Joe Ranga from the countless others who quit was not talent, luck, or perfect timing, it was the refusal to stop. Perseverance begins when motivation fades. In the beginning, excitement fuels action. Goals feel thrilling. The vision feels clear. But as challenges grow heavier, that excitement weakens. This is the moment where most people step back. This is where doubt becomes louder than belief. Joe Ranga faced this stage repeatedly. There were days when progress felt invisible. Days when effort seemed wasted. Days when quitting appeared easier than continuing. But perseverance lives in those exact moments. It is waking up when you feel exhausted and choosing to try again. It is continuing to build when results are not immediate. It is pushing forward when nobody is clapping for you. Perseverance is quiet strength. It does not seek validation. It does not demand recognition. It simply continues. Joe Ranga understood something powerful. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. Every setback became training. Every mistake became education. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" he asked, "What is this teaching me?" That shift in mindset transformed obstacles into stepping stones. Perseverance also requires emotional endurance. There are internal battles that no one sees. The fear of being left behind. The frustration of slow growth. The anxiety of uncertainty. Joe Ranga did not avoid these feelings. He faced them. He allowed himself to feel disappointment, but he never allowed it to define him. He learned to control his reactions rather than be controlled by circumstances. Another powerful aspect of perseverance is patience. In a world that celebrates instant success, perseverance demands long-term vision. Joe Ranga did not chase quick victories. He focused on building foundations, brick by brick, skill by skill, day by day. Even when the results were small, he valued consistency over speed. There were times when people doubted him. Some questioned his direction. Others quietly assumed he would eventually give up. But perseverance grows stronger in silence. Instead of arguing with critics, he let his work speak. Instead of defending his dreams, he developed them. Perseverance is also discipline in disguise. It is showing up when excuses feel reasonable. It is choosing progress over comfort. It is working when distractions call your name. Joe Ranga trained himself to act regardless of emotion. He understood that emotions change daily, but commitment must remain steady. The true power of perseverance lies in transformation. At first, you push yourself forward. Then gradually, you become someone who cannot be pushed back. The very struggles that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable. Challenges that once caused fear begin to build confidence. Through perseverance, Joe Ranga didn't just chase success, he built resilience. He didn't just survive hardship, he became stronger because of it. The shadows did not disappear overnight. But with each step forward they grew smaller. With each refusal to quit, his strength grew larger. Perseverance is not dramatic. It is not always visible. It is often slow, silent, and unnoticed. But over time, it becomes unstoppable force. And in the story of Joe Ranga rising from the shadows, perseverance was the foundation upon which everything else was built. Strength is rarely built in comfort. It is shaped in struggle, sharpened in difficulty, and tested in silence. In the journey of Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows were not merely dark moments, they were training grounds. They were the unseen spaces where real growth happened. The shadows represent those seasons of life when progress feels slow, recognition feels distant, and support feels limited. They are the periods when you question your worth, your direction, and sometimes even your purpose. Joe Ranga faced such moments repeatedly. There were times when his efforts were unnoticed, when opportunities slipped away, and when the future seemed uncertain. Yet, it was inside those very shadows that his inner strength began to form. When everything is easy, character remains untested. But when obstacles rise, true resilience is revealed. Joe Ranga learned that pressure does not break a person. It exposes their foundation. The struggles he encountered forced him to develop patience. The disappointments strengthened his emotional control. The setbacks taught him adaptability. In the shadows, distractions disappear. There is no applause to chase. No spotlight to depend on. Only self-reflection. It is in these quiet, difficult moments that clarity grows. Joe Ranga used these times not to complain but to evaluate. He analyzed his weaknesses. He improved his skills. He refined his mindset. Instead of blaming circumstances, he focused on growth. Shadows also build mental endurance. There were days when self-doubt felt overwhelming. Moments when comparison threatened confidence. Seeing others succeed faster can create silent frustration. But Joe Ranga understood that comparison steals focus. He turned inward. He competed only with his previous self. Every day became an opportunity to become slightly stronger than yesterday. Hardship has a way of removing illusions. It strips away comfort and forces honesty. Joe Ranga realized that strength is not about appearing fearless. It is about moving forward despite fear. Courage is not the absence of doubt. It is action taken in the presence of it. The shadows also teach humility. Success without struggle can create arrogance. But growth built in difficulty creates gratitude. Joe Ranga never forgot the nights of uncertainty, the moments of rejection, or the times when hope felt fragile. Those memories became reminders of how far he had come and how strong he had become. Every challenge demanded adjustment. Every obstacle required creativity. When plans failed, new strategies were formed. When doors closed, alternative paths were explored. The shadows trained him to be flexible instead of rigid. They taught him that resilience is not stubbornness, it is intelligent persistence. Physical strength grows by resistance. Mental strength grows by adversity. Emotional strength grows by endurance. Joe Ranga experienced all three forms of resistance. Instead of avoiding the pressure, he leaned into it. He allowed the struggle to shape him rather than shrink him. What once felt like darkness slowly became preparation. The long periods without recognition strengthened his independence. The criticism strengthened his focus. The loneliness strengthened his self-reliance. He began to see the shadows differently, not as punishment, but as preparation for something greater. True strength is invisible at first. It builds quietly beneath the surface. Just like roots grow underground before a tree rises tall, strength develops in unseen spaces. Joe Ranga's visible growth was the result of invisible battles won in silence. The shadows did not weaken him. They carved resilience into his mindset. They built patience into his. Rejection is one of the most painful experiences a person can face. It strikes at confidence. It challenges self-worth. It makes you question whether you are capable, talented, or even deserving of success. In the journey of Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows, rejection was not a single event, it was a recurring reality. But instead of allowing it to break him, he transformed it into fuel. Rejection often arrives without explanation. Opportunities disappear. Doors close quietly. Messages go unanswered. Efforts go unnoticed. For many people, rejection becomes a signal to stop trying. It feels personal. It feels final. Joe Ranga felt that sting too. He experienced moments where his work was overlooked, his ideas were dismissed, and his potential was doubted. But he began to see rejection differently. Instead of interpreting rejection as proof of inadequacy, he viewed it as feedback. Every no became information. Every closed door became redirection. Rather than asking, "Why am I not good enough?" he asked, "How can I become better?" That shift changed everything. Rejection forces growth if you allow it. It exposes weaknesses you may not see when things are going well. It reveals areas that need improvement. It challenges comfort. Joe Ranga did not run from these uncomfortable truths. He studied them. He refined his skills. He strengthened his preparation. Each rejection became a lesson rather than a limitation. Another powerful transformation occurred in his mindset. He stopped taking rejection personally. Not every opportunity aligns with your path. Not every environment recognizes your value. Sometimes rejection is protection. Sometimes it is redirection towards something more suitable. Joe Ranga learned to detach emotion from outcome. He focused on effort, not approval. Rejection also built emotional resilience. The first rejection hurts deeply. The second still stings. But over time, endurance develops. The fear of hearing no loses its power. Joe Ranga became fearless in attempting new opportunities because he understood that rejection is temporary, but regret can last much longer. Criticism often accompanies rejection. Some voices doubted his vision. Others questioned his ambition. Instead of engaging in arguments, he chose silent progress. He allowed improvement to answer criticism. He let results speak where words were unnecessary. Turning rejection into motivation requires discipline. It requires the ability to channel frustration into focus. Joe Ranga did not waste energy complaining. He redirected that energy into preparation. When rejected, he worked harder. When overlooked, he improved quietly. When underestimated, he trained relentlessly. There were moments when repeated rejection tested his patience. When progress seemed delayed. When effort felt invisible. But he remembered something important. Success is often built on a foundation of unseen attempts. Behind every achievement are countless rejections that shaped readiness. Rejection also strengthened his belief in persistence. If one path closed, he searched for another. If one strategy failed, he adjusted. If one opportunity passed, he prepared for the next. Rejection became a filter, guiding him closer to the environments and opportunities aligned with his growth. Over time, rejection lost its negativity. It became part of the process. It became a challenge rather than a verdict. It became motivation instead of discouragement. The same experiences that once felt like setbacks became stepping stones. Joe Ranga's rise from the shadows was not free from rejection. It was built through it. Each refusal sharpened his determination. Each dismissal increased his hunger. Each no strengthened his resolve to continue forward, stronger and more prepared than before. Self-belief is easy when you are surrounded by support. It feels natural when people encourage you, applaud your progress, and validate your dreams. But true self-belief is tested in isolation, when the room is silent, when no one understands your vision, and when the only voice left is your own. In Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows, isolation was not just a phase, it was a defining chapter. There were seasons when Joe Ranga walked alone. Not because he chose loneliness, but because growth often requires separation. The path he wanted to take was not common. His dreams did not always make sense to others. Some people advised him to choose safer routes. Others doubted whether his ambitions were realistic. Over time, support grew quieter and expectations grew lower. Isolation can be dangerous. It creates space for doubt to grow. Without encouragement, even strong minds can begin to question themselves. Joe Ranga faced that battle internally. There were nights filled with uncertainty. Moments when silence felt heavier than criticism. Times when he wondered if continuing alone was worth the effort. But isolation also reveals something powerful. Your relationship with yourself. When no one is clapping, do you still show up? When no one believes, do you still try? When validation disappears, does your vision remain clear? Joe Ranga realized that self-belief cannot depend on external approval. If it does, it becomes fragile. True belief must be built internally, independent of circumstances. He began strengthening his mindset intentionally. He practiced discipline without supervision. He worked without an audience. He improved without recognition. In isolation, excuses are easier to make. There is no accountability from others. But Joe Ranga developed self-accountability. He held himself responsible for progress. He became his own coach, his own critic, and his own motivator. Isolation also builds clarity. Without constant noise from outside opinions, you begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly. Joe Ranga used this time to refine his vision. He evaluated his goals deeply. He asked himself difficult questions about purpose, direction, and commitment. He ensured that his ambition was not based on ego but on genuine desire. Another powerful lesson isolation teaches is emotional independence. When you rely heavily on praise, you become vulnerable to criticism. When you depend on approval, you fear rejection. Joe Ranga learned to detach from both extremes. Whether praised or ignored, he continued working. Whether supported or doubted, he stayed focused. There were moments when loneliness felt discouraging. Watching others move forward in groups while he advanced alone required mental strength. But he understood that isolation is often preparation. The skills he built quietly would later become visible strengths. The confidence he developed alone would later become unshakable. Self-belief in isolation means trusting your process even when results are delayed. It means continuing to invest in yourself when returns are not immediate. It means believing in potential that only you can see. Joe Ranga nurtured that belief carefully. He protected it from negativity. He strengthened it through daily effort. Over time, isolation transformed from burden to advantage. It removed distractions. It strengthened discipline. It sharpened focus. Instead of feeling abandoned, he began to feel empowered. He realized that if he could believe in himself alone, he could withstand any environment later. True confidence is not loud. It is steady. It does not need constant reassurance. It grows stronger in silence. Joe Ranga's journey through isolation did not weaken him. It built internal certainty. It taught him to trust his preparation, respect his growth. Emotions are powerful. They can inspire action, ignite passion, and create momentum. But they can also create inconsistency, hesitation, and self-doubt. In the journey of Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows, one of the most defining principles was learning to choose discipline over emotion. At the beginning of any goal, emotion is strong. Excitement fuels effort. Motivation feels endless. Vision appears clear and thrilling. But emotions are temporary. They fluctuate. Some days you feel confident. Other days you feel exhausted. Some mornings you wake up ready to conquer the world. Other mornings you struggle to find energy. Joe Ranga realized that if he relied only on how he felt, his progress would be unpredictable. Feelings change daily. Commitment must not. There were days when discouragement tried to slow him down. After rejection, frustration naturally appeared. After setbacks, disappointment followed. After long periods without visible results, doubt crept in. Emotion whispered, "Take a break. Maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe you should stop." But discipline answered differently. Discipline is not emotional. It does not argue. It does not complain. It simply acts. It says, show up. Even when tired. Even when discouraged. Even when progress feels invisible. Joe Ranga trained himself to move regardless of mood. He created routines that did not depend on motivation. He built habits that supported growth automatically. Instead of asking himself whether he felt like working, he asked whether the work needed to be done. And if it did, he did it. Choosing discipline over emotion also meant controlling reactions. When criticized, he did not respond impulsively. When praised, he did not become distracted by ego. When facing obstacles, he focused on solutions rather than frustration. Emotional control became a strength. Discipline requires sacrifice. It demands consistency when comfort is tempting. It requires saying no to distractions. It means working while others relax. It means preparing when others procrastinate. Joe Ranga understood that success is often determined by what you do when you don't feel like doing anything. There were moments when exhaustion tested his resolve. Long days, slow progress, repeated challenges. Emotion suggested slowing down or quitting. Discipline reminded him of his purpose. Discipline reminded him of his long-term vision. Discipline reminded him that short-term discomfort builds long-term strength. Another important lesson he learned was separating identity from emotion. Feeling doubt does not mean you are incapable. Feeling fear does not mean you are weak. Feeling frustration does not mean you should stop. Emotions are signals, not commands. Joe Ranga learned to acknowledge them without obeying them blindly. Over time, discipline built confidence. Not because things became easier, but because he proved to himself that he could act regardless of how he felt. Each disciplined action reinforced self-trust. Each completed task strengthened momentum. Discipline also created structure during chaos. When life became unpredictable, routines provided stability. When external circumstances shifted, his internal standards remained steady. This stability allowed him to progress even in uncertain environments. Many people wait for the perfect mood, the right time, or ideal conditions. Joe Ranga learned that waiting often leads to stagnation. Action creates clarity. Consistency builds momentum. Discipline transforms potential into progress. As he continued choosing discipline over emotion, his growth became steady rather than temporary. His effort became reliable rather than occasional. His mindset became resilient rather than reactive. The shadows no longer controlled his pace. His habits did. Failure is often misunderstood. Many see it as proof of weakness, evidence of limitation, or a signal to stop. But in the journey of Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows, failure was never the end of the road. It was the classroom. It was the training ground. It was the mentor that shaped his growth in ways success never could. Every meaningful path includes mistakes. Plans collapse. Strategies misfire. Expectations fall short. Joe Ranga experienced moments where his efforts did not produce the desired results. Projects didn't succeed. Opportunities slipped away. Hard work sometimes led to disappointment instead of reward. At first, failure feels heavy. It challenges confidence. It raises uncomfortable questions. Am I capable? Is this the right path? Should I continue? These thoughts are natural. Joe Ranga faced them honestly. He did not pretend failure didn't hurt. He allowed himself to feel disappointment, but he refused to let it define his identity. The turning point came when he stopped labeling failure as defeat and started treating it as information. Every failure contains data. It reveals what worked and what didn't. It exposes gaps in preparation. It highlights areas that need improvement. Joe Ranga began analyzing his setbacks carefully. Instead of reacting emotionally, he evaluated logically. What could be adjusted? What skill needed refinement? What strategy required change? Failure sharpened his awareness. It made him more observant. It pushed him to learn continuously. When something failed, he didn't repeat the same approach blindly. He adapted. He experimented. He refined his process. Failure also built humility. Success can create comfort, but failure keeps you grounded. It reminds you that growth is ongoing. Joe Ranga never assumed he had mastered everything. Each setback reinforced the importance of preparation and continuous improvement. There were moments when repeated failure tested his patience, when progress felt delayed, when effort seemed disconnected from outcome. But he realized something critical. Growth often happens beneath the surface before visible success appears. Just because results are not immediate does not mean improvement is absent. Failure strengthened resilience. The first setback may feel overwhelming. The second becomes manageable. Over time, the fear of failure weakens. Joe Ranga became less afraid to attempt bold moves because he understood that failure was survivable. It was temporary. It was part of the journey, not the destination. Another powerful lesson failure taught him was accountability. Instead of blaming circumstances, other people, or luck, he looked inward. Taking responsibility allowed him to regain control. Something went wrong, he asked what he could improve. This mindset transformed him from reactive to proactive. Failure also built courage. When you realize that setbacks do not destroy you, you begin to take calculated risks. You begin to stretch your limits. Joe Ranga learned that avoiding failure often means avoiding growth. The willingness to fail became a strength. Importantly, failure shaped his emotional maturity. It taught patience during slow seasons. It developed endurance during long struggles. It reinforced focus during chaotic times. Each setback carved mental strength into his character. Success teaches celebration. Failure teaches preparation. Success shows results. Failure builds foundation. Joe Ranga's rise from the shadows was not built on a flawless path. It was built on lessons learned from missteps, adjustments made after mistakes, and resilience developed through repeated effort. Failure did not weaken his journey. It refined it. It clarified his direction. It strengthened his strategy. It deepened his under. Waiting can be one of the most dangerous habits on the path to success. Waiting for permission. Waiting for recognition. Waiting for the right moment. In the journey of Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows, one of the most powerful shifts happened when he stopped waiting for opportunities and started creating them. There were times when doors simply did not open. Applications went unanswered. Invitations never arrived. Efforts were overlooked. It would have been easy to blame circumstances, connections, or luck. It would have been easy to say, I just need someone to give me a chance. But Joe Ranga realized something important. Opportunity is rarely handed to those who wait quietly. Instead of depending on external validation, he chose initiative. Building your own opportunities begins with ownership. Joe Ranga took full responsibility for his growth. If no platform was offered, he created one. If no mentor appeared, he studied independently. If no audience existed, he worked as if one would someday arrive. He stopped asking, "Who will notice me?" and started asking, "How can I make myself impossible to ignore?" This required courage. Creating your own path means stepping into uncertainty. There are no clear instructions. There is no guaranteed outcome. But Joe Ranga understood that comfort zones rarely produce breakthroughs. He explored new strategies. He experimented with ideas. He invested time in developing skills that expanded his reach. Building opportunities also required creativity. When traditional routes failed, he searched for alternative paths. If one door closed, he examined the walls for windows. If existing systems did not accommodate his vision, he adjusted his approach without compromising his goal. Adaptability became a strength. Another crucial element was preparation. Opportunity favors readiness. Joe Ranga did not simply create chances. He prepared himself to seize them. He sharpened his abilities daily. He strengthened his knowledge. He practiced consistently. So when even a small opening appeared, he was ready to step forward confidently. There were moments when building from scratch felt exhausting. Progress was slow. Growth required patience. Without immediate results, doubt occasionally surfaced. But he remembered that self-created opportunities often start small. They require nurturing. They require persistence. Over time, small efforts compound into significant impact. Building your own opportunities also shifts mindset from dependency to empowerment. Instead of feeling limited by circumstances, Joe Ranga felt energized by possibility. He stopped seeing obstacles as barriers and started viewing them as challenges to solve. This proactive attitude strengthened his confidence. He also learned the importance of visibility. Hard work alone is not enough if it remains hidden. So he positioned himself strategically. He shared his work. He connected with others. He sought environments where growth was encouraged. Instead of isolating himself from the world, he expanded his network thoughtfully. Risk became part of the process. Creating opportunities often involves stepping into unfamiliar territory. Not every attempt succeeded. Some efforts failed. But each attempt increased experience. Each experiment built resilience. Each initiative strengthened independence. Over time, something remarkable happened. The more opportunities he created, the more external opportunities began to appear. His initiative attracted attention. His consistency built credibility. His preparation created trust. What once felt scarce gradually became accessible. Joe Ranga's. Circumstances can influence you. Challenges can test you. Failure can slow you. But ultimately, rising is a choice. In Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows, this truth became the foundation of transformation. No matter how heavy the shadows felt, the decision to stand up again always belonged to him. Life does not always offer fairness. There are setbacks you did not plan for. Obstacles you did not deserve. Delays you did not expect. Joe Ranga experienced moments when external conditions seemed stacked against him. Progress slowed. Doubt increased. Pressure intensified. Yet within those circumstances, one thing remained under his control: his response. Rising is not automatic. It does not happen simply because time passes. It happens when you consciously decide not to remain where you fell. Joe Ranga understood that staying down can become comfortable. It is easier to blame conditions than to confront them. It is easier to surrender than to struggle. But ease rarely leads to growth. Each time he faced difficulty, he reached a crossroads. One path led to excuses. The other led to effort. One path offered temporary relief. The other demanded resilience. He repeatedly chose effort. Choosing to rise means taking responsibility even when it feels unfair. It means refusing to let setbacks define identity. It means saying, "This situation does not control my future." Joe Ranga learned that while he could not control every outcome, he could control his mindset and actions. There were mornings when exhaustion tried to dictate his pace. Evenings when disappointment weighed heavily. Moments when fear whispered that trying again would only lead to more pain. But rising requires defiance against that inner voice. It requires courage to attempt again despite uncertainty. Rising is also about perspective. A setback can be seen as a final chapter or as a turning point. Joe Ranga trained himself to see obstacles as temporary. He reminded himself that no struggle lasts forever unless you allow it to. This mindset prevented small failures from becoming permanent limitations. Another important element of choosing to rise is resilience through repetition. Rising once is difficult. Rising repeatedly is transformative. Each time he stood back up, his confidence strengthened. Each recovery reinforced his belief that he was capable of enduring more than he initially thought. Rising also demands internal dialogue discipline. The way you speak to yourself during hardship matters. Negative self-talk can anchor you in defeat. Constructive self-talk can guide you forward. Joe Ranga replaced self-criticism with self-direction. Instead of saying, "I failed," he said, "I will improve." Instead of saying, "This is too hard," he said, "This is shaping me." The choice to rise does not remove pain. It does not eliminate struggle. It does not guarantee immediate success. What it does guarantee is growth, movement, momentum. And over time, consistent rising builds an unshakable mindset. Joe Ranga's journey from the shadows was not defined by how many times he fell. It was defined by how many times he chose to stand again. Each decision to rise strengthened his character. Each act of resilience reinforced his identity. Each moment of courage reshaped his path. Rising is not dependent on perfect timing. It is not dependent on support. It is not dependent on circumstances aligning perfectly. It is a personal decision made in private moments when no one else is watching. And in those moments, Joe Ranga repeatedly chose strength over surrender, action over avoidance, and forward movement over fear. In the story of Joe Ranga, rising from the shadows, we see that success is rarely instantaneous or handed on a silver platter. It is forged through resilience, relentless effort, and the conscious choices we make every day. Joe Ranga's journey teaches us that the shadows we face, doubt, failure, rejection, and obstacles, are not the end of the road but the very stepping stones to growth. Every principle we've explored, from perseverance and self-belief to adaptability, focus, and reflection, highlights a single truth: rising requires both action and mindset. The power lies not just in talent or luck, but in the decision to keep moving forward, to create your own opportunities, to learn from setbacks, and to remain steadfast when the world seems uncertain. Ultimately, Joe Ranga's journey reminds us that the choice to rise is ours alone. It is made in the quiet moments of reflection, in the disciplined repetition of effort, and in the courage to believe in ourselves when no one else does. The shadows are never permanent. They only define the depth from which we rise. Let Joe Ranga's story inspire each of us to embrace challenges, take ownership of our lives, and relentlessly pursue the vision we hold for ourselves. Because rising from the shadows is not just about overcoming obstacles. It is about becoming stronger, wiser, and unstoppable in the pursuit of our dreams. The journey begins the moment you choose to rise.